Welcome back to Inside South Florida. Believe it or not, childhood obesity often starts before kindergarten. So, as a parent, what can you do about it? Here's Dr. Robert Cywes to tell you his thoughts. Dr. Cywes, it's great to have you on the show. How are you?
Great to be here, Dave. Thank you very much for having me along.
So this is a super interesting topic, and it's so relevant to so many parents across South Florida and their children. New research is out that obesity often starts before kindergarten. That's shocking.
That's absolutely true. And I think, you know, what I like what you just said there is, where does it start?
Right.
Because so often in our society, we're looking for solutions when we don't understand the actual problem. So I've been working in the obesity field for a number of years, and the one thing I knew is that nothing we know is true or real. And we started with a blank slate and decided or followed our patients and learned from our patients what the true problems were and how to solve it. And the first thing that I realized is that obesity is not the cause of the problem. Obesity is the result. So what we have as traditional patterns, starting very, very early on with our kids, are groups of kids who are vulnerable to addiction. And there are two groups of kids, primarily as parents, we're responsible for creating those kids who are vulnerable to addiction. The first group, the youngest group, are those that come from a hedonistic or a permissive group, where there's no structure, the kid does not have to put any effort in, and they find a common denominator with something simple that they can eat and drink that makes them feel good. Quite frankly, an obese child is one who no longer selects food primarily for nutrition, they eat for pleasure. Mm-hmm. And when you select stuff for pleasure and it's ubiquitous in the household, right, then you eat in excess. So those families without structure, without rules, the obesity begins at a very, very early age, as soon as the kids start eating. So no wonder that starts and the trends establish as a parenting style and as a way to raise kids, even under the age of 5. There's a second group that occurs a little further down the road, which are the authoritarians, where the rules are very rigid, very, very strict. And those kids absorb a huge amount of emotional distress from their parents because the family is result-oriented rather than effort-oriented.
Right.
And Johnny never performs well enough. So Johnny, instead of feeling good about what he's done, feels terrible about what he's done because it wasn't good enough. And then he triangulates and finds something inanimate to make him feel better. And that may be cigarettes, it may be alcohol. And in our local society, those are the sugars and the starches that get you high and really don't have a direct consequence.
So poor Johnny, first of all, bummer for him.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So it's not as easy as you seeing a patient, a child, and saying, okay, don't eat carbs or diet or something like that. That is not the solution. It's, you know, that's a symptom of, I guess, the bigger problem, right?
Correct, absolutely. Yeah. And I think in our society, it's easy to have kids, but nobody really instructs you or teaches you how to raise them properly. I'll give an example of those, of the 3 parenting styles, the 2 that are vulnerable to addiction and the one that will almost never become an addict. The first group are the permissives, and that is where, you know what, Johnny, I want you to eat your broccoli. All right, Mom, I'll eat my broccoli. But you know what, Mom? There's pizza in the fridge. Let me eat the pizza tonight, and I promise you tomorrow I'll eat double the broccoli. So there's the broccoli, they've diverted away, and Mom says, okay. Rules are speed bumps. Okay, and obviously Johnny's eating pizza. Pizza's a carbohydrate. They get high on it. It's not a food, it's a drug, and they're getting fat. The second group are the authoritarians, where Mom says, you know what, Johnny, here's your broccoli, it's good for you. You will sit at this table, you will eat this broccoli, otherwise you go to your room. And Johnny strangles down the broccoli. Look, Mom, I finished. All right. So Johnny feels terrible. He goes off to his room. What's under his bed? A Snickers bar.
Sure.
Okay. The appropriate way to parent that child is from an authoritative approach to engage the child in their raising. Have them be partner in the decisions. So you set the rules, you set the structure. Johnny, you are going to eat a vegetable tonight. But here's the choice. You can eat carrots, broccoli, or peas. Which one do you want? So you're offering the child ownership within structure.
Well, just to play devil's advocate, the kid says none of the above, Snickers bar.
Okay, he's not going to have the Snickers bar.
Right.
Okay, that's where the structure.
Not an option.
That's not an option.
Right.
That's where the rules, the boundaries are clear,
right,
but there's choice within those boundaries. 3 or 4. No, Johnny might say, well, Mom, I want carrots, and they weren't on the list. That's fine. It's a vegetable. But when Johnny makes his selection, the next thing that happens is, Mom, I'll have broccoli. He's got ownership of that. It's his broccoli. Mom puts the broccoli down and eats half of it. Great. You did a good job. You didn't finish it all, but you did fantastic. Off you go and go play.
Sure.
Johnny feels proud of the fact that he ate his broccoli. He feels good about it. Mom has given him praise, and he goes off and is happy and playing. So he has derived pleasure from doing a good act, rather than pleasure from the drug.
This is so fascinating to me because we have done so many of these interviews about New Year's resolutions for adults, eating right for adults, don't eat carbs for adults, but I'm wondering, should kids be following some of these same rules? In other words, don't eat carbs after 6 p.m. Should a kid have a cheat day if he eats well for 5 days? I mean, how many rules do you put on a child as a parent with regards to eating well?
I think the problem is that we are seeing carbohydrates, which are really eaten for pleasure, and in other words, a treat. We're seeing them become a staple called food that we eat for hunger and nutrition. And that's the mistake. I assume you drink alcohol. I do. I'm not an alcoholic. When I'm thirsty, I'm drinking water or something that...
That's not water.
That's not water. It
Yes,
looks like water.
Yes, it is.
It may be Sochi water, but...
I hope not. No, it's good old-fashioned South Florida
Right.
water.
So
yeah.
when I'm thirsty, I'm drinking water. If I'm out watching a football game, I may have a beer as a treat.
Right.
Okay? But if I'm drinking beer continuously because I'm thirsty, I'm going to get drunk, I'm going to get into trouble, and I'm going to become an alcoholic. The same thing with carbohydrates. If you eat your vegetables, your salads, your protein sources as your primary food for nutrition, and that's what's available to the kids, and you take them out every now and then for a pizza, every now and then for a donut, that's a treat. And they can learn to separate the two. One is for pleasure, one is for nutrition. The problem is when you mix those messages and you've got treats available all the time, there's no boundaries.
Where do you stand surgically with regards to children, lap bands, things like that? Because you and I were talking before this interview that it does happen that children sometimes have surgery. For you as a physician, I'm guessing that's the last resort. I'm guessing. What is your process before a child has to have surgery for this?
I think the most important thing is to separate the two concepts, the concept of obesity and the concept of weight loss completely. Obesity is about a substance abuse problem. It's about an addiction to carbohydrates, and no surgery is going to correct that whether you're an adult or a child. The surgery is primarily there to help the children to lose a huge amount of weight so they can get their self-esteem back, they can lose that weight, they are successful in their efforts as they break and reform habits. But the program is way more important than the surgery itself. And I think that's the key. When you treat diabetes, type 2 diabetes, you put a patient on medication, and unfortunately 1/4 of my kids are already on medication for type 2 diabetes. The kids I operate on. That's a horrific statistic.
And how old are they roughly?
That's 10 to 18.
Right.
10 to 18, 10 to 20, 1/4 of them are on type 2 diabetes medications. Well, the medication doesn't cure diabetes, it slows down the progression of the disease. But you cannot be a type 2 diabetic if you don't eat carbohydrates. So yes, we have to treat the medication, and we have to give them medication to treat the diabetes, but we also have to get them off or away from their sugar and starch so they can cure the problem. It's the substance that makes you fat that makes you sick. And that's a concept people don't understand. As soon as those sugars go in, that's when they're toxic. Nobody smokes 3 cigarettes and goes for a run to breathe out the nicotine. But we tell our fat kids to go for a run to breathe, to burn off their calories.
Right, but the damage has already been done.
Damage is already done.
I wish we had a half an hour to talk about this. We're out of time. It's so fascinating. But if people want to ask you questions to get more information, because I'm sure people have more questions for you, how can they reach you?
Our website is obesityresolved.com, or they can get us through at St. Mary's Hospital, Palm Beach Children's Hospital is where I practice.
Dr. Cywes, this was fantastic. So interesting. Thank you so much for coming on, and come back again, okay?
Thank you very much, Dave. I really appreciate being here.
That's our pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Cywes. When we come back, you may be eligible for a tax credit or two you didn't even know about. Sound good? We'll tell you all about it. Stick around.